So we were just speaking of a future, and so let's take a look at the future in technology. What would it look like, and what kind of role will LiFi play in this future? That's a question for Professor David Passig. Professor David Passig, should I introduce you, or will you introduce yourself? Okay, I'll just introduce you for a second. You are the head of the Virtual Reality Laboratory at the Bar Ilan University in Tel Aviv, Israel, and you are a futurist, a lecturer, a consultant, a best-selling author who specializes in technological, social, and educational futures, and we will understand with your speech why we should see technology as a living organism.
Thank you. Well, what I would like to do in my 30 minutes is to demonstrate a little bit how we are able to foresee emerging technologies and the role they are going to take in our societies. Actually, this is the most important issue that all of us need to tackle. There are so many new innovations. How do we know which one is going to really blossom and have a great impact on societies? So I'm going to be a little bit far-fetched, if you wish, a little bit imaginary, in order to understand the historical context of our technologies, and more specifically LiFi. Even though you're going to hear a lot about LiFi today and tomorrow, I'll be touching it just at the end of my presentation. The idea is to give you a very broad perspective of how humanity is developing technologies and what drives us to develop those technologies and use those technologies. It's not working? Great. All right. I'm going to take an idea that was introduced a few years ago by another scholar and write on it in order to explain an interesting, let's say, concept of future studies and technologies very specifically. You know, most of the people think that we try to understand nature and use its features in order to develop technologies. But I believe there is something much bigger than that. I believe that we are a species that develops ideas, concepts, and then we understand nature. And the way we tell the stories of how or what is exactly nature, that's what we discover in nature. Let me explain it in a little bit, in a broader point of view. I would like to touch upon those two questions. First of all, maybe the way we perceive technology is a little bit childish. We think it's just a tool with which we do things. Maybe there is something much, much profound that is in the making. And if we will just, listen to another idea, what is technology, maybe we will be able to develop very different technologies that we think we are able to develop. Okay? Let me stress at the beginning of my presentation that I do not believe that technology is a living organism, okay? It's just a myth. And it's a story that if we will be able to tell in a very complicated way, we will be able to develop new technologies that we can't even imagine at this point. Let me stress the idea of a myth. Claude Lévi-Strauss said that a myth is just a construct that bridges nature and culture. With myth, we are able to develop societies, civilizations, ethics, everything that we are developing is based upon the stories that our mind is constantly generating. So just put it in mind. I'm going to tell you a new story about technology. And with that story, I would like to explain how we will be able to develop new technologies, use technologies that are at this point considered, very disruptive, but actually they are not disruptive if we put those technologies in the context of our storytelling. The idea is that something always drives us as a human species to tell stories, to generate stories. And these are what we call anomalies. And those two anomalies are the driving force behind the story I would like to tell. The first one is that, I believe all of you have been, perceiving it for the entire life, that whenever something is happening at the same time is being developed in different places by different people that are totally isolated from each other. Now, it's an anomaly that can be explained very easily, where there are so many people worldwide, probably, different people, different places will be thinking the same thing. The other anomaly is something much, much difficult to explain. How come different people at the same time, at the same epoch in time, discover new discoveries, scientific discoveries? This is not so easy to explain, okay? So maybe the story I'm going to tell will somehow explain these anomalies, but just bear in mind, it's just a story. Nothing is real, okay? But with those kind of stories, our mind is able to actually bring to life different aspects of nature that we are not even aware that they exist. And the myth I would like to speak about is the following. Not all of us are aware of the origin of the term technology. Somebody maybe knows what's the origin of the term itself? What does it mean? Technology? Somebody knows?
It must come from ancient Greek, doesn't it?
Exactly. Which one?
Technos, of course.
Yeah, of course. You heard my story before that.
No, not even. I just guessed.
Okay. So actually, it's art. Okay. It's not a technical thing of understanding nature and using that understanding to develop some tools. That's not it. Art is a way of humanity to express its fears, its deepest fears, its wishes, etc., etc. So technology is another form with which humanity is expressing the most profound ideas that are driving all of us. Now, based on this concept, I would like to introduce you to the term which is called the technium, which says basically the following. Technology, generally speaking, is a kind of a new superorganism that is emerging in front of us. If we will be able to recognize it, to have the tools to listen what that superorganism is trying to tell us, then we will be developing new technologies, and whatever disruptive technology we think is around us, it's just not a disruptive technology, but something that can be a tool with which we will continue developing the story we are telling ourselves about nature. The person that started this kind of discussion is Kevin Kelly, and he wrote a few books. I would recommend all of you to read this book, in which he's trying to say that technology really is a living force, and it has a purpose in its existence, and which is a very interesting purpose that I will touch upon later on, bringing the potential of humanity to higher and higher levels of actualization. Let me briefly define what's a superorganism and show you that actually our technologies are also an evolving superorganism. I'm not sure it's a living superorganism, but actually it's a superorganism. Okay. It's not an easy thing to define superorganism, by the way. But we are all familiar with superorganisms, and so just by giving you some examples, that will suffice to continue. Take, for example, this nice structure that ants are able to develop. Do you think that a single ant knows what's happening all around it? A single ant that is somehow here, okay, in this spot, I don't think is able to even understand what's happening here, or not even grasp the structure that the superorganism, the whole ants are being able to develop. So this is basically the idea of a superorganism.